And then we might go there again, but hopefully this is a thought-provoking and a discussion that brings more of sharpness to our thinking process and our solidarity movements in the region and wider. We are about to start a panel titled Whitewashing Genocide in Gaza, the Resolution on Srebrenica and the Palestinian State. I am going to be talking with three comrades who are wonderful scholars. Maybe three. The third one is going to show up. Nidžara Ahmetašević, who is a scholar and an award-winning journalist from Sarajevo. She was shortlisted for the European Press Prize in 2022 and awarded the Fetisov Journalism Prize in the Contribution to Peace category. Her work focuses on human rights, migrations, war crimes, and the role of the media in post-conflict societies. She's also the author of The Media as a Tool of International Intervention, House of Cards, the book about the international intervention in Bosnia and Herzegovina after the war. And I recommend here to everyone to read the book. I read it just before it was published, and it was just one of those rare critical pieces coming from the region these days. Next to me is Sladjana Lazić, who's a scholar focusing on the questions of peace and justice, politics of knowledge production, and anti- and decolonial approaches to thinking and knowing and doing peace. And they're one of the co-founders of the Yugoslav Women Plus Collective and work as an assistant professor at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. And Sladjana recently co-organized, I would say, a really big, not in terms of numbers necessarily, but super relevant protests among academics at one of the most renowned international relations kind of academic association that really didn't find any room in their 4-day-long conference to address the genocide in Gaza. So, you know, with her organizing force, we would gather every day and organize small and big protests in front of the ignorant academics. So that was really important. No, I know. I said co-organizer. Mm-hmm. And then Piro Rexepi, who is about to appear on this couch or in front of this couch, is a research fellow at the School of Slavonic and East European Studies at University College of London. He's the author of White Enclosures, Racial Capitalism and Coloniality Along the Balkan Route. And, you know, this is such an important thing that, you know, we have a scholar, a thinker, an activist who brings the questions of race and racism in the Balkans so sharply, so clearly, and he engages in such relevant conversations and builds movements with his way of thinking. And some of the comrades from Kosovo and Tirana collaborate with Piro a lot. I'm sure Piro will show up, but before he does, oh, there he is. Hi, Piro.
Hi.
We just started, and I briefly introduced you. And in a minute, I will be asking these three dear friends of mine a couple of questions. Actually, we're going to try to make this panel kind of short and go more into the discussion with, with your questions and your comments. I'll be asking just one question each of them, and so each of them will have about few minutes to respond, and then maybe we can have just a larger discussion. But I want to say that this panel was sort of, inspired by, or in a sense, emerged from the collaboration that Piro and I started recently. We kind of undertook a labor of co-writing a piece on how the resolution on Srebrenica recently adopted in the United Nations really sort of whitewashed the genocide in Gaza. And so, we went into the analysis of the text of the resolution, but also we went into the analysis of the process where Rwanda and Germany proposed a resolution that condemns the genocide that happened 30 years ago, whereas we know that for the past 30 years there was so much denial of that genocide and so much, obscure conversations. And then all of a sudden Germany, who's complicit in the genocide of Gaza, in Gaza, proposes, as they said, the resolution that condemns any denial of the Srebrenica genocide as a historical event and actions that glorify those convicted of war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide by international courts. And we were concerned, with the two questions, why now and with what intent, because it is really an odd timing. And we are also thinking how the victims of the genocide in Bosnia, not only Srebrenica, and we'll talk about this too, have been bruised and re-traumatized by this instrumentalization, where, also the representatives of the Memorial Center of Srebrenica are partaking in this political action on bringing on the resolution that really doesn't change the reality, neither of the victims of the genocide in Bosnia, neither of the victims of the current genocide in Gaza. So what was Germany trying to buy with this political momentum? This is the question, or maybe we already all know the answer. And so, as I said, I'll ask a question first to Nidžara, and then Piro, and then Sladjana, and then we'll just open up the floor for you. So Nidžara, you've recently also recognized that the resolution on Srebrenica only happened now because of the political suppression of the visual flows and emotional stamp the genocide in Gaza leaves on all of us. You've also recently written about the relationalities between genocide denial politics between Gaza and Bosnia, where you opposed this deceiving lingo of ethnic cleansing and the terms that are kind of trying to suppress and deny the genocide itself. And even the discussion about the localization of the genocide in Srebrenica and not acknowledging that genocide actually happened on the wider territory of Bosnia. Could you talk a little bit about these historical continuities, the denials of Bosnian genocide and the continuities towards, the trajectory towards the denial of the genocide in Gaza?
And you want me to do it in 5 minutes?
Just offer some thoughts.
So, impossible, but I will try. Oh, sorry. Okay, this is yours because then it will be too complicated. So yes, when we talk about Bosnia and what did happen in Bosnia in the 90s until today, we talk only about genocide in Srebrenica, and that's the only part of this horror that happened there that is recognized by the international court. It took years, ages for Bosnia and Herzegovina and different international institutions to recognize genocide, and all that time, all these years, they used to also the media until today they do that. They use the term ethnic cleansing, which is completely wrong term because ethnic cleansing doesn't mean anything. There is no law in the world that defines ethnic cleansing. So if you accuse somebody of ethnic cleansing, that person cannot be taken to the court because it's not a crime, it's nothing. However, Slobodan Milošević, who was very skillful in using propaganda, he was the one who populated the use of that term in order to avoid responsibility and to kind of like hide what is really happening and what he is really doing and what are his intentions. And that's what I was writing about. I believe in power of words, and I believe that words can change things. And that's why I wrote this article, and that's when even when I talk for many years about what did happen in Bosnia, I always insist that we use this sometimes for some people maybe a bit harsh terminology. So I insist that people who are convicted for war crimes by The Hague or any other tribunal, that we don't call them war criminals, but that we call them murderers, rapists, because in that case, it really, you get the picture of what had happened in Bosnia, and you get the picture who are these people that we're talking about. So Milan Lukic, who set human torches in Visegrad and killed in that way more than 150 people, is not a simple war criminal, because when you say war criminal, it's almost romantic, and then we can discuss, oh, he's a hero, he defended Serbs, he da. No, he's a murderer and rapist, because he set up a rape camp in Visegrad when more than 200 women were kept and raped for ages. And that's why even using term genocide is so important, because ethnic cleansing is nothing. Like when you describe what ethnic cleansing is, you remove one group, that's genocide. So let us use it. In Bosnia, we have a problem until today because this genocide is recognized only in one municipality, which even if I just tell you who are not legal experts, some of you are, but even to anybody who is not legal, it's absurd. The genocide can happen in one municipality. Of course, it did happen all over the country. But the international community was not willing, and it's not willing even today, to recognize that, because in that case, they will have to admit that they are responsible for what did happen in Bosnia. If they recognize genocide immediately in 1992, they will be obliged to react, to stop, and 200,000 people would be alive. And I mean, these 40,000 women that were raped in Bosnia would not be raped. And I would probably be a journalist writing about rock and roll instead of human rights and crimes. And like this, my life went, I mean, most of my career, when I was 19, it was the first time in my life that I entered a mass grave. And until today, I'm still going around the mass graves. And that's something that I don't want to do. And that's what the world is kind of like. I'm angry at the whole world, because instead of me becoming a rock and roll journalist, I'm a journalist writing about genocide and trying to explain to somebody, don't do the same mistake that you've done to me, but change the discourse and let us believe in the power of words, and let us trust the people, let us believe in people and in each other and in the pain, and let learn from the previous lessons, because I'm sick and tired of this, like never again, never again. And I mean, I never even dreamt about that I will be the person who will went through it again. And then again, today I have to say never again, and nobody understands me. So I really want to insist on using this proper terminology. Let's call the genocide, and let's name who is guilty and who is responsible and who has obligation to react and to stop it.
Just keep the mic for another minute. If you can keep the mic for another minute. I just want to thank you for this. So the proper language and naming things is part of the accountability practice, and it's also how we are less complicit in whitewashing, art washing, pink washing, different types of washings that we are experiencing. But one thing that I want to come back to, so the resolution on Srebrenica was adopted recently. It was spearheaded by Germany and Rwanda, as I said. And the language of the resolution is very, very general, but it gives us to think a lot about what is this general terminology going to do? How can it be manipulated with? But more importantly, also, apart from Germany and Rwanda, the question is, why is the Memorial Center of Srebrenica participating in this? What are we experiencing now? What kind of political appropriations? What kind of politics is that? How do you explain that?
I can't. I cannot understand why director of the Memorial Center is doing this. One of the reasons may be that he will get some money for the Memorial Center from Shoah Foundation. It may be. However, for me and for many people in Bosnia, this resolution doesn't really mean anything. It's even a big problem for us because it gave opportunity to all the nationalists in Bosnia to kind of play again with all our emotions and with fears and with everything that is going on at the same time. When I talk about Srebrenica, and I was in Srebrenica actually 3 days before I came here, for 3 months people in villages and around Srebrenica don't have water. For 30 years in Srebrenica there is no gynecologist. And most of the people who are living in Srebrenica are women because most of the men are killed. For 30 years in Srebrenica, there is no psychologist. And these are genocide survivors. They need more than any resolution. They need psychiatrists, they need psychologists, and they need gynecologists. So when I talk about Srebrenica, I want to talk about this. At this moment, they don't have water. And resolution mean literally nothing to it. There are women who are still living alone in the villages around Srebrenica, waiting for their sons to come after 30 years, still making extra coffee if they maybe come out from the woods. So they're just waiting for their sons. They will never make like a small pot of coffee. They make a big one because he will maybe come. And she's sitting there and waiting, living in like really bad houses, which are no basic conditions. And she cannot even go to see a doctor. And then we are talking about resolution and about international community that is washing their consciousness. Not even that, they're just playing a game and planning to leave some people in some other countries around the world in the same situations, like people in Srebrenica that are just kind of like, I don't even know what we are in Bosnia anymore. I'm not sure, not only Srebrenica, the entire country. We're just like useless, not even human beings, but like something there that is manipulated for this or that purposes as the time changes.
It's hard to move on after your words. I almost want to sit with this, what you said. But I will turn to you, Piro. Can you hear me well? And would like to ask you if you could talk a little bit and continue off of what Nidžara said about these exploitations of the genocide in Bosnia and Kosovo by the US and the EU and their promotion of universalism, of genocide recognition within the international bodies and international legislation, while all the time they're actually voting against ceasefire in Gaza. You argue that it is necessary to talk about the genocide in Gaza from the perspectives of Kosovo and Bosnia. Could you please speak more about that?
I mean, it's, I would say in Kosovo, the situation is even more censored than in Bosnia, because if in Bosnia there's at least journalists who will raise the issue, like Nidžara is raising the issue. In Kosovo, even journalists won't dare touch the subject. And I think it may be because the pressure on the Kosovo government is probably tighter. Maybe because the sovereignty of Kosovo is somehow more fractured than the Bosnian one, but these are all internal politics that don't necessarily justify the political silence. But I think in Kosovo, they go a step further to also erase any kind of past associations with Palestine, and not to even mention the word Palestine itself, which obviously isn't the case in Bosnia. So one thing that becomes obvious is that in both Bosnia and Kosovo, the need for recognition of what happened during the wars was so necessary that any kind of recognition, even if that recognition comes not to deal with the past or bring to justice those who committed genocide and war crimes, but to simply legitimize another form or whitewash an ongoing genocide in Gaza, people are willing to work with this kind of a resolution simply because they've been deprived of any kind of acknowledgement and more so of any kind of reparative justice. And I think in part it also has to do with the fact that after the war, there was very intense policing of what happened. So most of the internationals that governed Bosnia and Kosovo after the war, the mantra at the time was don't talk about the past, don't dwell on the past, look towards the future, which came with all sorts of neoliberal agendas of also, I mean, other political projects that were subscribed under this idea that we shouldn't necessarily deal with the past. And so I think the genocide on Palestinian people is bringing up questions about how the genocide in Bosnia and Kosovo were dealt with during the Yugoslav wars, and how they're being instrumentalized now for yet another project. I don't know that I would add to anything that Nidžara said, in the sense that I don't think it's specific to Bosnia. I think Kosovo is in the same situation, but I would say, broadly speaking, most Balkan countries are operating under a similar modus operandi. The only thing I would say is that we need to be obviously cautious in how these histories are being recovered and for what purpose. And so I think it's very important that we're having this conversation, because this isn't just happening in relation to Palestine, it's also happening in relation to the refugee crisis. And so there's this constant instrumentalization of our vulnerabilities to create new projects of erasure. And I'm very worried about, to the extent that we're willing to jump on that bandwagon. I mean, I'm using problematically perhaps the collective we, because by and large, people haven't really. The solidarity and the protests in Sarajevo, but also in Pristina, have been inspiring. And so perhaps I'm only talking about the kind of formal state response to, an institutional, I would say, response to the genocide on Palestinian people. Yeah, and I think the other thing that I was reflecting about today as I was reading through the program is how European leftist politics, I mean, the right for sure, it's out of the question that you can rely for any kind of engagement with. But I would say there is no political spectrum, a European political spectrum, that one can stand with today. Because the European left will betray racialized subjects at some point. Same happened with Syriza in Greece. Same is happening with Vendosia in Kosovo. So I don't think a typical Euro leftist discourse responds to colorblind frequently, responds to the ongoing political crisis and the genocide in Palestine and the ongoing murder of refugees on our borders is necessarily the response. So I think it's also a very good moment to reflect on how those Euro leftist ideas about universalism and the European Union have to kind of be taken essentially for what they are. In part because we've also been policed in how we talk about the politics of Europe and the European left. And so when I was talking about universalism, I guess that's also what I was questioning. This idea that the European left recruits references of their seemingly universal but ostensibly European rights in addressing the conflict in Ukraine, but not the genocide in Gaza. And so I think that's a very important moment to kind of think about the politics of the future, because I'm convinced that this is not, this is not it. And so that I would leave it at that in terms of gesturing towards what kind of solidarities and political alliances do we want to think about beyond simply criticizing what's going on. And I think Also recovering past politics of solidarity that have been erased or intentionally sidelined in the last 20, 30 years, to kind of rethink a different genealogy of situating ourselves in the larger global South and global East, outside of the obviously axis of aggression, which is the European Union and the United States in this case.
Thank you so much, Piro. And really, you know, thinking about the politics of future and solidarity making, Sladjana was talking this morning in our meeting about the necessity of connecting experiences of violence and genocide in Bosnia and Kosovo, and, you know, violence elsewhere in the region, with the genocide in Gaza, both in terms of analysis and mobilizing the movements and our strategies. Sladjana, so the question for you is, why is such complex analysis important for us to engage with in addressing what Amitav Ghosh aptly called omnicide? You talked about genocide and ecocide and cultural side and scholasticide, edocide, so omnicides, yeah.
Thank you. I'll try to be concise, even though it's late. And
the selective universalism too.
Yeah, and also I think both Piro and Nidžara have said very important things that we should discuss, as well as Maj talk today. So the reason why I said that we should think with these different experiences of violence and genocide is because I think we shouldn't lose from our sights when we mobilize, when we speak of the genocide, ongoing genocide in Gaza, that genocide, colonialism, and settled colonialism are not events. They are structures. They don't end up with Dayton Peace Agreement. They don't end up with ceasefire. They don't end up with resolution. And we should be careful how we think and how we strategize around it. And yes, as Maj was saying, and also Nidžara, the most important thing right now is stopping this spectacular ongoing violence. But that is not the end, and we should pay attention what is termed in the public discourse as a radical demand, and what does that do? What does it do with the political energy and where the focus and the efforts are moving? If calling for a ceasefire is understood as a radical demand, what does that do to the organizing? What does it do with the possibility of imagining otherwise, as Maj was talking about? What does it do about whom decides how liberation of Palestinians, of Bosniaks, or Sudanese, Congolese people should look like? So to pay attention how the discourse, how the table is set for the discussion, and what does that do? So if we think of these things as structures, that also allows us to avoid slipping into white saviorism here in the Balkans, and to talk about, teaching or learning, teaching someone based on the experiences from the Balkans, because we are learning with Palestinians, with Congolese, with Sudanese people together, because the work hasn't been done here. So in that regard also, when we talk of mobilizing, especially in Serbia, for Palestine and for Gaza, by all means, yes, do that. But at the same time, I would really like to see the same energy invested in organizing when it comes to Bosnia, when it comes to Kosovo, when it comes to speaking about Srebrenica, when it comes to speaking about Kosovo, and also putting those experiences into juxtaposition, not comparing them, because we want to avoid hierarchization. We want to avoid whitewashing of genocide in Gaza with the resolution for Srebrenica, but we also don't want to use mobilizing around Gaza and Palestinians as a way of avoiding responsibility for the genocide in Bosnia and Kosovo, or talking about it. So those are the things, when we think of these, of genocide, of settled colonialism, and colonialism in general as a structure, then that allows us to see these things, right? And at the same time, speaking of, the ceasefire and, how whether it should be a one-state solution, two-state solution, or whatnot, I don't think it's ours to ask the Palestinians who are undergoing genocide what will be this, how their liberation would look like, because they're telling you they want the genocide to be stopped, and how the liberation is going to look like is up to them to decide. Ours is to talk about the unfinished business here in the region, because the settler colonial project, the outpost of the settler colonial imperial project that is manifesting itself through Israel was also manifesting itself through Serbia and Serbian settler colonial projects. So we have to keep those things in mind constantly in juxtaposition. And yes, we should also, in our region, in the same manner that we do not meddle into how Palestinian or telling them how their liberation should look like, we should also rethink how our liberation here should look like. Because are we sure that we are now living post-genocide, post-war, and what post means? How our liberation should look like, right? So yeah, I think I would stop here because I'm not sure how articulate I am this late in the day.
Thanks, Sladjana. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your experience of working in the region across different issues. And you all work with a lot of violence, experiences of violence, and it was really useful to hear your perspectives. We talked about the resolution on Srebrenica as a way of whitewashing genocide in Gaza, and then in the panel before this, when Majid was talking why we shouldn't think of a Palestinian statehood as an answer, we did see how the conversations about the Palestinian statehood and recognition of the state also whitewashed genocide in terms of focusing the discussion on the recognition while really kind of trying to shove it under the carpet that most of these countries or all of these countries actually have been continuing sending weapons to Israel, signing contracts through trade agreements or doing extension of trade agreements. The university collaborations continued. Divestments didn't happen. They just kind of continued doing it. And so in a sense, we are seeing how many different political moves, of which resolution on Srebrenica and the recognition of the Palestinian state were the largest one, how they sort of suffocated the air and moved the gaze from public, from what's happening in Gaza, and took our political energies, our mobilizing energies away for a moment. Because, I think a lot of us who are in different, what we call progressive movements, we really kind of got kind of attached to this conversation about Palestinian statehood and went into that. Not to say that we are not demanding ceasefire and that we are not engaged in critical mobilizing too, but maybe not with the same energy, with the same force. So yeah, I think recognizing our own complicities, which might come from the best intentions, is something that we also want to recognize through these conversations. We open the floor to you for your questions, for your comments. I can see Valeria and Aneta and Almina. Okay, Eva? Or you can use these mics, yeah.
So I have a question when you talk about the experience and how we from the Balkan can talk about the shared experience with the Palestinians. But I was born in '92, for example, so I was born in war, but my experience of the war is different from your generation. How can my generation, who doesn't remember the war, but it's still part of our history, how can we be part of this conversation? Is there space for us when we talk about these topics? Can we be part of these conversations, or should we listen to the elders, their experience that we don't have? what would you say to the generations that were born in the war, how they can look at this topic, and how can we talk about this? Thank you.
Shall we collect a few questions? Or you want to go ahead?
Great question. Actually, we are the ones that we have nothing to learn, to teach anybody. You are the generation that should talk, because you know how war is fucked up, and how you know the hell that war creates. So your experience is much more valuable than mine or yours. Like, I'm full of anger. I'm full of despair. I don't exist practically. I just have the war in myself, and I'm just going around and like bullshitting about it for the end of hoping that somebody will catch something from my experience that I never wanted to survive the war. It's like, it's just no. And I ruined your life. All of us are ruining lives of your generation, and I think that living through this burden and to this hell that we put you, it's much more valuable, because unlike us, you also, I think you could learn the lessons from us, and unlike us, maybe you know what the peace is, or at least you don't have only nightmares, you have dreams also. I have only nightmares. So I think that you have much, and I'm sorry for that, but I really hope that you will do much more than I can. I can just like tell something, all these boring stories about the wars, about genocide, about what not to do, and about how painful it is. But actually your generation can give a hope. We don't have a hope.
And then Valeria, if I could just add to this, on a slightly different note, that people of your age are organizing across the region. There are a couple of different initiatives that you could join. One of them, this initiative for human rights, Youth Initiative for Human Rights, that addresses the questions of the legacy of the war crimes and speaks a lot about the criticality of youth movements and how they could, or they do envision peace and different ways of living. And they're not the only example, but I'm just throwing it out there for you to look at. And yes, very important question. Thank you for that. Aneta, please go ahead, and then Almina.
Thank you for your thoughts, to all of you. This is not a topic, but you were speaking about denial practices, and our region is, of course, leading in this kind of negating political reality and history as well. So we have a long tradition. But we also have a tradition of fighting against denial practices, which doesn't work now. I mean, we come from Croatia Initiative and anti-war coalition, looking just Croatian context, for example, anti-war coalition from the 90s fell apart regarding to Palestine. So we have our ex-comrades who fought against denial of Srebrenica genocide that are very quiet about Palestine and Gaza, although we made an effort to challenge them to speak, to protest. Most of the people from Initiative Free Palestine from Croatia are younger generation, with a few exceptions, and we weren't, unfortunately, strong enough to challenge our colleagues from many NGO organizations that keep on fighting against in Serbia as well, fighting against denial of Srebrenica genocide, Prijedor, wherever atrocities happened, but they are not willing to speak about Gaza, and until 10 months, they are still very quiet. So it's not just about the principle of memorial in Srebrenica, it's much wider topic from this side of the coin, what has happened. So all of you, including Emina, can answer, but you can, možete se dogovoriti ko će. Thank you.
Piro, would you like to maybe?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a great question. And when I was speaking about the betrayal of the left, that's exactly what I had in mind. In part because European leftist politics are so devoid of any kind of acknowledgement of racism, of class implications, of positions, that they still want to operate like in the 90s by leveling out the entire field and talking in abstractions about some sort of, I don't know, solidarity in which you don't acknowledge the fact that who is the victim and who is the perpetrator of crime. And so, of course, I mean, I'm not shocked, unfortunately, that the Croatian anti-war alliance, just like until very recently, the Croatian anti-fascist front had problems around what they dismiss as identity politics when you talk about Palestinians, as Emina and I had similar experiences at University of Rijeka. And so the question becomes, how can you even engage in a dialogue with movements who claim to be anti-war and anti-fascist, but at the same time reproduce the same kind of fascist and racist discourses that are at the crux and roots of this war? And so I think that's a big, for me personally, in my opinion, I think that's a big issue that hasn't been addressed properly in most anti-fascist movements in the region, in the sense that unless we discuss it openly and address it, it will always remain. It would always remain a game of Olympics of victimhood, where you organize with anti-fascist comrades from Serbia and Belgrade, and they tell you that they were also victims, and and so you listen to it, and you have to sit there and at the same time listen to their critique of how the Albanians brought down Yugoslavia, or similar such narratives. And so what Sladjana said about hierarchies, I think it's very important to keep in mind, not because we want to reproduce hierarchies or turn them around, but because we want to be honest about what happened and the positions in which we take on what. I mean, clearly, most of these anti-war alliances and forums in the Balkans were totally on board on the Ukraine issue, but they're not on board with the Palestine issue. And to me, the question is very obvious. It's about racism, because I can't think of any other reason as to why they wouldn't see it as problematic to show solidarity, unconditioned solidarity with Ukrainian resistance, but not with the Palestinian resistance. And so there we also have to talk about Islamophobia and how that structures these kind of positionalities and dismissive attitudes towards what they frame identity politics, which I won't go into because it's been already critiqued. But I also wanted to say something to Valeria, because your question was really, I mean, it really touched me. And I would just say, don't compromise on the language. I think if that we did, my generation did that after the war in Kosovo, they were like, no, you don't speak about reparations, you speak about reconciliation. So even though we would think about reparative justice, the internationals reframed that discourse to mean reconciliation. And so we started saying reconciliation. So nobody talks about reparations or reparative justice. We don't talk about post-war society building. We talk about post-conflict market-based reconstruction. So I think those are, I mean, Nidžara talked about language, and she's obviously written about it as well. But I would just say, adding to that don't compromise on the language, just like Nidžara said, if it's genocide. And I also have to say, I find it kind of problematic when people say the genocide in Gaza. It's the genocide on the Palestinian people, because just like the genocide in Srebrenica wasn't just meant to kill the people of Srebrenica, it was meant to annihilate Bosniak people and Muslims. So similarly, Gaza is just for the genocidal project of the Zionist settler colonial state of Israel. Gaza is just one part of the puzzle of how they envisage a post-genocidal Israel. So yeah, I think language is so important, and I think your generation is definitely doing that. And like Nidžara said, it's also teaching us how to do that as well. I mean, I listen to Gen Zs on TikTok, and I'm honestly inspired how there's no mincing of the words. There's no, oh, let's be reasonable. You know, there's no call to order, to adulting, to whatever terminology was used to kind of police our languages after the war. And I definitely think, like Nidžara, you're far more courageous than we were, yeah.
Right. So, yes, I would like to follow up with, I actually also have more hope in your generation than in ours. Also because one of the, again, going back to the structures and thinking of structures and how the liberation, what kind of liberation we want in our region is connected to that question. Because if you look at the 90s peace movement and activists, they have been so NGOized and like the whole dealing with the past has been, I'm tired, turned into projects, and the spectrum of possible option of what do we do with it has been narrowed down, because it has been put into the boxes of the language and the form that has been that has been suggested by the donors. So that's also where I look at, as Piro said, right? If we look at the student movements right now, at the encampments, they are actually teaching moments, they are pedagogical moments. And I think it's up to you to bring these things together and to open up the question of what does liberation mean in Bosnia, in Kosovo? Instead of telling you from Croatia to people in Kosovo how the liberation should look like, you know, kind of don't do that, but ask the question within Croatia and bring these struggles together. Bring into your discussion, into your organizing, both the genocides from the 90s and the ongoing genocide, right? And the terms in which we speak of these things. So I actually have way more hope in you than in, you know, our generation or the generations before us, because again, I think that one of the aspects through which the structures of the global racial neoliberal capitalism have been framed, the way we think of what post-conflict reconstruction looks like, or what are the options that we can think of as a solution within the region, have been very much narrowed down. And that has allowed many types of violences to continue and to be reproduced in different ways differently. So I think actually your generation is way more is very good position to bring those things together.
Just add for a second, but also we can't really expect from the same people to continue and to take a part in every single struggle that we are going through. I mean, Nataša Kandić and women and people like her, they've done their best. And they also have a right to be tired at some point of time. I can't expect women from Srebrenica to join me to fight for whatever I'm fighting this day. They're tired. I am tired, and I cannot imagine how Nataša, who is woman, who was spit on, pushed on, they beat her, they done this, or Vesna Teršelić, or many others. They done their part. I can learn from their lessons, good and bad, because not everything they have done. And now I do what I think it's the best. I would rather connect with you, with young people in Kosovo, with Palestinians, and try to with people in US and somewhere else. And let's do some other kind of like groups and ideas, and let's learn something else and let them rest. It's enough. It's enough. They've done enough.
I would say that, but they're still active. It's not the
Let them be whatever they are. Just take over from them. They're much older than me, but yeah.
And I'm older than them.
I'm wanting to also respond just by adding an information. We learned this morning that the Bled Strategic Forum is happening on September 2nd, and that the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs is speaking, hosted by the current Slovenian government. And it's also interesting that the panel on reconciliation and what can be learned from this region and taken towards building a more just future. We have one of the mentioned prominent peace activists from the region talking to a person from Israel. There is no Palestinian speaking, and there is no one from the current pro-Palestinian movement in the region speaking. So that's part of the thing that you were talking about, Aneta, and what Piro and Sladjana were analyzing here. I do agree that we should also let people rest, and that not everybody can be part of every struggle. But what is really concerning for us currently in Croatia is that many of those who claim to be peace, anti-war, human rights, and justice activists are really now not wanting to even say that there is genocide happening, and they do collaborate and have financial loyalties with Israeli or Zionist funders, and so that's really concerning and something that we should be condemning more. And I would also say, and I know maybe I'm here in disagreement with some members of the Free Palestine Initiative in Croatia, but I think our Green Left has betrayed workers, racialized populations, Palestinians living in Croatia, and social movements that are advocating for freedom in a very different way than the left sees it today. And so, yeah, they became more liberal than the liberals. But Almina, it's your turn. Almina and then Fiola.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you to all speakers for talking about this topic. I would like to hear your opinion on the concept that I'm calling seeds of a genocide. 2 months since they adopted this resolution on Srebrenica genocide, and during which the Palestine was mentioned maybe 1 or 2 times by states that unfortunately don't have a big impact on a global politics. And 2 months after, we are hearing calls from England and other countries in Europe for Srebrenica 2.0, and also we are seeing in terrorist attacks worldwide usage of Srebrenica, usage of a narrative of rapers and murders legally defined as war crimes, war criminals. Using the signs, using narratives that were used in Srebrenica genocide, and that is happening like 2 months after resolution was adopted. So I would like you to, in my opinion, when we are seeing the dead bodies on social media, we are failed already, because like international law system is unfortunately is not able to operate differently than system that created that law system. So in corrupted system, you can't have a system that is not corrupted. In a discriminatory system, you can't have a legal system that is not discriminatory. So legal system is always a mirror of societies and it following societies, and the legal system unfortunately are always dealing ex post, and sometimes maybe we are thinking like we have a legal system, we see genocide and we see dead bodies on the TVs, and we like turn on this legal system and it will disappear. So I would like to ask you on that are we prepared to recognize seeds of a genocide, and in a Palestinian people are being dehumanization of a Palestinian are for decades, and it's too late to react and to call legal system when we are seeing the dead bodies. But also referring to these calls for Srebrenica 2.0, New Zealand attack on a mosque, the attacker listening before that attack, the songs that were used for motivation for attacks in Srebrenica, and etc. And chanting Karadzic as a hero that stopped the spreading Islam in Europe. Are we preparing, especially young people, to recognize these seeds of a genocide in our system? How our educational system is aware of this? How our curriculums are prepared for recognition of these threats? And thank you. Anyone who wants to answer it, I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Fiola from the feminist collective from Pristina. For me, it's really, really important that I'm part of this discussion that is happening today, especially reminding us this issue of our violence and our problems that we have within the region. From the experience when organizing the activities and protests in Kosovo about pro-Palestine, which makes me reflect now and also mention the hypocrisy that we encountered sometimes. Because when we talk, for example, we're all together. When we talk about, also with the activists from the region, when we talk about pro-Palestine, and the liberation of Palestine, but I found myself being accused of nationalism when I talk about the liberation of Kosovo. So this Palestine issue has been really a great, it's a historical time to also bring back talking about also our countries. And and what I wanted to mention as well, when you talked about the young people, it is very important to also maybe tell you about our challenges that we have when organizing and when mobilizing, because we are challenged a lot from neoliberal agendas and from the capitalist manipulations. When it comes to mobilizing, because it is really, really difficult today to gather young people and we find them quite neutralized when talking also about Palestine, but it's really also difficult to politicize them. So maybe it's just an advice on how to educate each other, because we also face a lot of challenges when it comes to educate ourselves, because we are surrounded a lot. It's difficult not to find facts, but to be exposed and to get the adequate education, because we know after the war and everything was the education system is quite weak. And the only hope, or let's just say from my personal experience, it was I got educated from the activists, from these informal groups that we by ourselves created, and that's how we started each other proposing books and everything. And it was late. I wish I could earlier be educated, and today I cannot accuse or judge young people when they are neutralized and when they don't want to talk or they don't want to, be part of any discussion or debates or anything. So just maybe the general advice.
Thanks, Viola. Thanks to both of you. You've both posed big questions, and I think we're going to end the discussion with answering these two questions. Whoever wants to start?
It's very difficult. I didn't expect that somebody will ask me for any advice. I can't give advice about anything in life to anybody, to be very honest. As I said, and I'm totally like, my life went into totally wrong direction. Like, so, as I said, I wanted to write about punk, about rock, dreamed to be published by the Rolling Stone and to win the Pulitzer. Unfortunately, I did publish for the Rolling Stone. I was nominated for the Pulitzer, but my story was about war crimes. So I have no advices to give. I have no idea what is right, what is wrong. I don't have nationality. I don't believe in states. I don't believe in borders. I don't believe in anything. I believe in people. I'm trying to live the best in that way. I learn from other people much more from the books. I live since 2015 on the migrant route, and I learned much more from the migrants than from anybody in my life, as well as from people in some villages around Bosnia. But I will go back to what the beginning of this conversation and the need for all of us, and I hope I will answer in that way to both of your questions, to use a proper terminology. We are living fascism. We are back to fascism. The moment when the world decided to let Milošević do what he started doing in Kosovo, continued doing first here in Slovenia, then in Croatia, then in Bosnia, and going back to Kosovo, when they let Karadzic and Mladić, when they gave them a power to negotiate about the peace, they unleash a fascism. And they are living that fascism today. We all live that fascism today. And we have to call it we have to use the term fascism. If we use the term fascism, then we can organize ourselves and become anti-fascist forces together. And this anti-fascism we have to fight in Palestine, in Sudan, in Bosnia, in US, everywhere. But we have to recognize fascism is around us. And it came from here because the West let Karadzic, Mladić, and others, Milošević, Tudjman, and all of them. And they didn't only let them do what they want, they let them negotiate my life. Peace agreement is negotiated between war criminals. When I say war criminals, not only Milošević and them, but also Clinton was there, also all the others. And when you say that we are the champions of denialism, we are not. America is the champion of denialism. West, UK is the champions of denialism. Germany, they're all champions. We are okay. I mean, whatever that means. Okay, I'm not saying good. Okay, but comparison to them, I'm not sure. But however, yeah, let us use the proper terminology. This is an era of fascism again. Let's fight it. Let's organize. Let's remember some lessons from anti-fascist struggles. And I think there is a lot to relearn from that, and to kind of like add these new knowledges that we gained in last decades, and let's fight together. Let's connect. Let's just break these walls. Like let destroy. Let's crush borders. Not only these physical ones, but all the borders that they are building around us. Let's destroy this system and try to build the world that we want to live. Maybe people do want fascism. So at least even in that case, it's important that we recognize it on time. So in that case, I will move away if you want to live in fascism. But I mean, that's your choice. But if the most of the people want fascism, okay, then go through it. I done it once. It's not nice. I'm not going back to that again. So I hope that I know it's far away, but I also hope it do answer your question. It's really, I believe in feminism, anti-fascism, and constant struggle. Like every day when you go out, you fight for something, but fight together with other people who are kind of like close to you, like abandoned states, abandoned all these like politicians and everything, and find each other and build something that will crush fascism at the end.
Piro, would you like to go next?
I mean, I'm not after what Nidžara said, I'm not sure what to say or add. Maybe I think community is still important. Like when I think back, what was the most valuable emancipatory lesson for me was to organize with other queers and trans people in Kosovo and Macedonia in the 90s and 2000s, and realize that you feel more empowered as a community. You learn more from one another. And even at times when you feel like you're small and insignificant, I mean, when we registered the organization, there was only like 7 of us. And it felt like it wasn't going to go anywhere. And maybe it didn't, but also it did a lot in terms of being with each other and thinking about these issues and connecting to other anti-fascist communities in the region, I guess. But also working from, I think it's important, it's working from a place of figuring out where all of this is coming from. I'm very much against the idea that like bad people are everywhere and we don't know the enemy, we are also the enemy. I don't buy into that. I think it's important to identify the structures of violence because they are there. Structural violence, colonialism, fascism is not a situation like Sladjana said. It's a very specific organization of violence that operates. And so tracing them down and calling them out, I think it's also important because their goal is to generally erase their traces. The violence that goes through that language, I think it's also an important work that can be done collectively. And when you see that there's no way to engage with a certain community, I mean, I would say just disengage, because I've realized so much time and opportunity was lost for me and the communities that I was part of, trying to persuade somebody who obviously was, or some groups that obviously were, now when I think about it, fascist, into kind of, so instead of persuading them, I think it's so much more important to build support and start from people who think and act every day along the same political milestones that you're thinking about. And for me today is stopping the genocide in Palestine. And that's the litmus test. And if I'm talking to anybody who says to me, well, wait, it's problematic, I already know where they are politically, because there's nothing messy or problematic about the fact that we're witnessing daily live-streamed genocide. I'm not sure what else to say.
Thank you, Piro. Sladjana?
I think that you already gave part of the answer, and Nidžara and Piro also added to that. But I think you said it right. It's learning with the people with whom you're conspiring to create the world otherwise. That means you talking too much and pondering together. But it also means, apropos the first question, not relying necessarily on the academic educational system to get the necessary teaching. Because I think that we who work within academia, that is nowadays in its form and shape and a neoliberal corporate enterprise that is very much deeply involved into the colonialism and settler colonial project, reproduction of the settler colonial projects. And we can see that with how universities have reacted to student encampments. So I wouldn't expect that knowledge to necessarily get from the institutional system. With all due respect to the exceptions within the university system who prove the rule that institutions as such function differently. Because as Abdu said recently on when he was a guest on Red Nation podcast, academia is not a place of liberation, it's a place of resistance. And we can see that not only when we look at how deeply Israeli universities have been involved in creation and reproduction of the settler colonial project in Palestine, but also in our own region, right? And that is again something that we haven't really talked and discussed about the responsibility of the university academics and opinion makers and the university system as such, also for whitewashing the genocide or diminishing it by creating these fluffy terms or kind of, as Piro said, framing things as complex, too complicated to understand, right? So as much as we who work within the universities would like to think, or we quote, bell hooks, that the classroom is the last possibility for radical thought. To a certain extent, yes. But if it was really that radical, as Masha Veličković recently said on Twitter, we wouldn't have been paid for it. So by all means, learn with the people with whom you're organizing. As Piro said, also, kind of don't waste the energy on those with whom you whom you need to convince, right? I'll stop there.
Thank you all. And all they said, I agree with. I would just like to add something from my practice too. The question of how do we talk to young people and what can young people do, is much bigger than what we can respond to. And back in the day, we were young people asking the same questions a bit older people who were sitting here, and talking about this big stuff. I want to say the following. It is up to us about our individual and collective decisions, what we decide to do every day. My personal decision is to do every day a little more that stretches my empathy and my solidarity. And so I do that through a commitment. I have a couple of commitments every day. One is to meet at least one person a day and have coffee with and have a deep conversation with. That's part of my strategy of mobilizing people into the Free Palestine movement, into the other movements, advocating for the rights of migrants, people who are working on documenting migrants' deaths and disappearances, people who are involved in the work of organizing people's assemblies or people's tribunals and whatnot. So my commitment is to have at least one conversation a day, deep and meaningful conversation, where we mobilize our empathy, our solidarity, our politics, and sharpen whatever we can. The other commitment that I have is to read 10 pages a day. I really think we don't read enough. I'm seriously concerned about that. And we organize reading circles in Zagreb every first Wednesday at the Museum of the Contemporary Art, where we engage with the different texts centering Palestine and decoloniality and resistance. And sometimes we have people who come without reading because they didn't have time, and I get that. I am a mother, I am a scholar, I'm a researcher, I'm an activist, I get that. But sometimes it's so important to have that 20 minutes and read what other people are writing, look at that knowledge production. It's crucial in ways we are shaping our thinking and our talking too. And, we have all our joys. I kind of want to be a writer, so I like to write something every day. Someone likes to cook. Some people cook in the colors of Palestine. That creates so much, such a new world. I just want to, like, you know, I want to say, like, engage in something creative. But, you know, I don't want to speak only about individual practices. It is so important to be with the collectives every day, to breathe the collectives, to meet people where they're at. We come from a movement that is very complex, and I'm sure every single movement in the region is very complex too. We talk every day amongst radical feminists, white liberal feminists, pious people coming from, you know, traditions of Islam or Christianity, some other religions. We are also with war veterans. We are with Palestinians who are advocating one-state solution. We talk to people from, we talk with Arabs and Palestinians who think that the two-state solution would be okay. We talk to those who think of abolition very seriously. So we come from so many different spectrums and knowledges. And the conversations are very exhausting, but those are the conversations and people we need to be with. Because those are the only people that are here for free Palestine, and potentially for free migrants, and potentially for free workers. And so I think that's the commitment, to sit in those hard places. You know, and my friend, my very dear friend Nidžara said today, I never wanted to survive the war, and yet she's still here. And she is surviving and thriving and teaching us so much. And, you know, we have to sit here in that discomfort, as, you know, and the discomfort that Majd produced today as well. I don't know if Majd is here. You know, when he objected, some of the ideas that we thought were progressive and heartfelt and, you know, solidarity, he confronted us and said, that's not how I feel about it. The commitment to hardship, to dealing through hardship, is enormously important. And we oftentimes don't have capacity for that. And, you know, for me, the concerning thing about our generation, but also younger generations, is that our mental health is, you know, declining, deteriorating a lot. Younger generations today don't have capacity to deal with everyday problems, let alone huge crises, survival crisis, for instance. I'm seeing that in my classroom. I'm seeing that across the movement. I'm also seeing a lot of resilience. I'm seeing direct language that Piro was talking about. I'm seeing a lot of defiance, but also, you know, the mental health is really deteriorating. And we need to be supporting younger generation to come to a place where there can be okay enough to endure this struggle, that, you know, it's not that we started it. We are also sitting on shoulders of many who've started it, who've been doing it. And so to be able to sit on the shoulders with more credibility and integrity is also the work we need to do together, not as older generation and younger generation. And, you know, working across generations is a challenge for us to really deeply engage with. And it's been a long day. It's been a really long day. And we've engaged in so many tough conversations. And I hope, you know, for all of us, this means something, some stretching of our ways of learning and being in difficult spaces, but also in rewarding spaces. In many places, people don't get to have these conversations. These spaces are being censored, sanitized. Police comes in, takes people away. We have that privilege and that, you know, hope, humility to be in this space with that gratitude. And so, yeah, I'm just very grateful for this day and for this festival. And I think we're actually closing the festival with this. I'm not sure if Eva or Barbara or Monica want to say any closing words, but maybe they will as we come out and drink water, wine, and other drinkables.